Ride-sharing apps like Uber and Lyft can be convenient, but they're not without their own problems. In this week's Know the Law segment, Tom Sinas is here to talk about the risks of ride-sharing. We talked about this before.
We have, and I think it's important to do this segment now to remind people of some of the points we've hit on before. Here's the thing that surprises most people. Uber, Lyft, Steady Fare, all these businesses are in operation in our community. But here's the thing you may not know. There are no laws or regulations governing ride-sharing services anywhere right
on
now.
Purpose, right? The state lawmaker actually voted to not regulate it.
There is a bill that was passed by the House of Representatives over a year ago that never passed the Senate, never made it to the governor's desk, and it's just sitting there. Now, it could be passed sometime this fall, or we could consider it again next session, but right now the state has said, we're not going to regulate. And the city of Grand Rapids, unlike some other cities, has said, you know what, we're not going to regulate. So what you need to know if you're going to use these services, it's not to say there's anything wrong with them, but don't think that there are rules, regulations, statutes.
Protections.
Right. There's nothing. The only deal is the deal you make with the driver and the ride-sharing company. And I think that's one of the things people really have to remember. The other thing, because there's no regulation of this industry, there are some insurance issues that people are really struggling with.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about the first confusing one. What if you're in an accident and you're a passenger and you get injured and you need no-fault benefits? We've talked about the fact that no-fault benefits include your medical expenses. The way that the laws are written now, because we have no regulation, it's confusing. Will you get your no-fault benefits from your own insurer, or will you get it from the insurance company that insures the Uber vehicle? We don't have a good answer to that question right now. What about liability insurance? Okay, liability insurance, remember, is the insurance that applies if you're in an accident and it's somebody else's fault. Well, what happens in an Uber? Where do they draw their liability insurance from? We have no laws on the books.
Uber says they're not an employee of mine.
That's right. Uber says they're not an employee of ours, but we do have a policy that would cover them if an accident happens with a passenger in the back. However, there's no requirement that they have that policy. And a lot of these Uber drivers are driving under their own personal auto insurance policies that may very well have a clause that says, we don't provide coverage to you if you're operating a vehicle for hire. So if you're involved, if you're in an Uber or a Lyft and you're involved in an accident and you're hurt, there is an open question as to where the liability insurance claim will end up. And that's really a function of the fact that we don't have any rules of the road when it comes to ride-sharing services. It's the classic example of technology ahead of the curve on the law.
So it ends up getting solved in the court.
For now, these issues are being solved in the courts one case at a time. And the question is going to be whether or not, as a state, we're going to regulate these under a state statute that would apply to all municipalities, or whether we're going to allow municipalities to regulate on their own. Because one thing that will happen if we pass the state law, most likely, is that municipalities or local governments will not be able to regulate on their own. That's how the current bill is written. So you sort of can't have it both ways. But people in West Michigan need to know that if you're in an Uber or a Lyft or a Steady Fare, there are no rules out there.
All right. We've been warned. And if somebody wants to call your office about an accident they've been in?
Anytime. Call us in Grand Rapids, 616-301-3333. You can find us online at www.sinasdramis.com or shoot us an email, info@sinasdramis.com.
Tom, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Christian.